What is up there, Reject Nation? We are here today to now rank the Batman actors, the live-action theatrical versions of them. You might have caught our ranking the Batman movies list, and within the time of filming that video, I've rewatched some Batman movies, and believe it or not, this list on my end might surprise you. Before we go into that, why don't you guys leave a like? Let's just swing into it then, shall we? John, you want to kick us off?
Sure, I would love to. And the number 7 spot for me is a Batman who I thought was actually a really great casting choice, but doesn't really amount to much more than that, and that would be good old George Clooney. I feel like there's a lot about his persona that lends itself very well to Bruce Wayne. There are aspects of his performance I feel like he showed up. I just don't necessarily think that he put a unique character spin on Bruce Batman beyond his George Clooney charms, which lend themselves more to Bruce than Batman, so that's why he lands in my bottom spot.
Could not disagree more with you, John. George Clooney's my number 1. I'm spoiling it ahead of you guys. No, I would definitely say George Clooney's like the bottom of the bottom. For everything that you said, yes. And the main reason why is because whatever goodwill George Clooney had for this movie, it is just completely overshadowed by all the crap surrounding that film to the point where I don't know what was good about George Clooney being in this film other than the fact that it might have sounded good on paper. To this day, like an older Bruce Wayne, George Clooney, like, I can see it. It leaves like no impression. It actually comes across as the most bland to me and makes his performance just a mockery of Batman, even though I don't feel like his intention while filming it was ultimately that. It's kind of just wrapped in a Schumacher mess is the way I would put it. I have a feeling we'll be aligned up until we're at the top 3, then we'll see where we're at.
Okay,
What's your number 6?
My number 6 is Val Kilmer for a specific reason, because in rewatching Batman Forever, which landed towards the very bottom of my Batman movies ranking list, one pleasant surprise out of that was I actually really like Val Kilmer as Bruce Wayne. Not as much as Batman. I feel like when he's Batman, it's actually a little distracting, or there's something about him that doesn't really quite match with the whole persona he's trying to put on as Batman. But as Bruce Wayne, I was actually quite endeared to him, and I really like the take that he is really intent on, philanthropy. He does seem more like a reclusive and a just guy rather than like, hey, playboy, and I like that take on him. So I thought Val Kilmer as Bruce was quite nice, but given sort of all the other asterisks surrounding that movie and the fact that I don't love his Batman as much, I would put him in this second to last spot.
I thought we'd be aligned for a little bit longer. I'm surprised. My number 6 is actually Batman Forever's Val Kilmer. Val Kilmer.
You have me going.
Val Kilmer in this. It's interesting because when I was taking a look at some clips again, I was trying to pinpoint what it was about Val Kilmer in this movie that is just not quite working for me. Granted, I think what he does is a much bigger leap than George Clooney and Batman and Robin. But I really think this comes down to, again, the Joel Schumacher vision, because I feel like Val Kilmer is actually doing the best he can do given the circumstances. And that's part of what weirdly makes some of his Batman scenes unintentionally funny, is because he's doing his best to take this seriously. Because of the kind of movie it is, I can't take it as serious as the movie wants me to. However, the leg up that I would actually weirdly give on the portrayal of Bruce Wayne Batman in Batman Forever versus the 2 installments that came before, directed by Tim Burton, this actually feels more about Bruce Wayne and Batman than those other 2 films did. Mm-hmm. So in that aspect, like what you were saying about Bruce Wayne, I do like that we explored a little bit about him. He's rarely going into like therapy sessions this time around. So I like what he was doing as Bruce Wayne. However, his Batman, I think it's maybe the lips. I think the lips are a little too glossy. There's something about them lips that just makes me go, I can't take this seriously. And you come across more like a bro dressed as Batman than you do as a serious, menacing guy. Like, I don't believe the crazy dude underneath there, the crazy guy that Batman has to be underneath the mask.
I'm a little afraid that we might divert sooner than expected, because my number 5, I deliberated hard and then I was just like, go with your heart, John. So my number 5 is Ben Affleck. I think he does a really solid portrayal of Bruce Wayne and Batman. I really like him in that role. I just don't have the same attachment to it that everybody else does. I feel like once we got to Zack Snyder's Justice League, that was when I was finally like, like, I see what everybody else sees, and I care about this guy to the degree that everybody else does. But given that it took a long time to get there, and it took so much kind of sifting through these alternate cuts, which isn't really his performance's fault, but even in the BVS Ultimate Edition, I was like, I like him. I'm just not like attached in any particular way. And so due to that, I mean, he's miles better and more well-rounded than a George Clooney or a Val Kilmer, but there are, just things about him that don't draw me in and touch me personally as a viewer as much. But I think he still is a great choice, and if he was to continue beyond the Flash movie, I would be thrilled to see that.
You're going to get a lot of agreeance on that. That's all you expect. I'm going to make sure to call this video Restore the Snyderverse, ranking all the Batman movies.
Yep.
Just to make sure you're okay.
Of course.
No, my number 5 would be Adam West in Batman, the 666 movie. I think what Adam West is doing here ranks above Val Kilmer and George Clooney simply because it is intentional. That whole comedic performance, that dry, deadpan type of delivery, he inhabits the world. Like, he's the perfect Batman to complement that world of the 60s Batman. It's fun when you watch his interviews with people like Robert Pattinson and Jeffrey Wright, who are like, I actually grew up on that Batman show, and I didn't think it was funny at the time. Like, I took it serious. I thought there were like real stakes when I watched that. I don't know what it's like to be plucked into that time period and watch that show. Yeah, I grew up in the 60s. I would still think it was funny, or would I take it serious? Regardless, his version of Batman, while not my favorite, I think perfectly inhabits what that world is, and it's the best lead you could ask for Batman in that version.
Absolutely, and that segues perfectly into my next spot, because my next spot would be Adam West, and I agree with everything you said. And I think also too, looking at his portrayal of Bruce Wayne and Batman, I mean, there is a quirkiness there, obviously, that is straight out of that 60s serial vibe, but there's something about the way that he's able to pin that together. Like, the further we get into these adaptations, the more we explore the sort of interplay between Bruce and Batman, and the more we explore the idea that he's probably not like a well-adjusted guy who just wants to help people. He's probably got a lot of trauma, but Adam West, I feel like, plays that version. Just this guy who's an eccentric millionaire who goes out and gallivants and fights crime. Like, I believe that in some ways more than any of the other ones, going for that kind of a vibe. He's not the most tortured Batman, because that's not what they're going for. And yeah, I think he does a really nice job, and I just love watching him. That's the thing, is like, I really enjoy genuinely watching his performances, no matter how silly whatever circumstances might read nowadays.
So my number 4 would actually have to be Michael Keaton. I really like Michael Keaton. I'm very excited for his return in the Flash movie, especially because of the actor Michael Keaton that I grew to love over time. Like, a lot of my favorite works of Michael Keaton are not the Batman movies, it's a bunch of his other work. What I love so much about what he does in this movie in particular is that there's a kind of subtlety to the darkness underneath him, because it's not like the most outlandish performance. It's not even the most emotive performance. However, what's so cool about what he does is when he is Batman, you can also see that with his version of Bruce Wayne, there is that thing in those Michael Keaton eyes that you want to get nuts version of him. You could feel that there's that Bruce Wayne version in there that is crazy. There's a crazy guy underneath there. And I love how, if you just pay attention to the movie, you can feel that, but it's done in such a subtle way. The thing that really overshadows the whole thing for Michael Keaton is in both those movies, I don't personally feel like the character Tim Burton was most interested in developing or exploring was Batman. It's like, you think of Batman 89, Joker was the big talk. You think of Batman Returns, it's Penguin and Catwoman who are the big talk. I feel like if you're going to talk about Batman, he should be one of the big talks, and he had 2 movies and he didn't seem to be the thing in the zeitgeist. And to this day, he's not the thing that's most remembered upon when you think about those films.
Yeah, absolutely. And another good segue, because my next spot would be Michael Keaton for a lot of the same reasons you mentioned. And I do think that, yeah, once you get to Batman Returns, especially for me, and you are exploring more of just, again, that sort of shared folie à deux, the sort of shared psychosis of outcasts and whatnot, the shared struggle of outcasts. Like, there are things about his character that are further illuminated, even though, yeah, I feel like the movie kind of wants to be about way other things than Bruce or Batman or his personal struggles. But yeah, Michael Keaton just has so much presence, and I love watching him. And for the time he was playing the character, and originating that more gritty, dark darker, more serious take for the first time in a big scale. I think he really has a lot of presence that supports that, even if the movies themselves are focused on other things.
Yeah, his fighting, it's a little dated, his fighting, and also just Michael Keaton's build does feel a little too skinny for me.
I just feel kind of like a guy. Yeah. I don't imagine him working out.
So 3. Here's the thing with my top 3. I did fluctuate between all 3 of them when I just think about it. If I were to have a pass here for a second, I would say they're all equal because they all bring something different to each one of the roles in their own way. But if I have to rank them, here it is. So my number 3 would have to be Christian Bale in the Dark Knight trilogy. I love his performance. One thing that I really love so much about what Christian Bale has done with this one is he's able to actually have like a full character arc. He's able to start off as just Bruce Wayne, traumatized, decides I'm going to become a symbol for Gotham, the city I love, and then has this complete hero's journey. Well, by the time you get to Dark Knight Rises, he makes the ultimate hero sacrifice. Now you actually have a rarity in the Batman world. Is a full storyline that is complete with this 3-picture deal. I think that Christian Bale does an excellent job in each one of them. Do I think the voice in The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises that he does as Batman goes a little overboard? Yeah, I do. And I think partly why I would put him as number 3, even though I do think he does an excellent job and Batman Begins is still my favorite out of his 3 performances, I think the voice becomes a bit of a joke. More than just the fact that it's clear he's doing a voice. The duality or segue shift between Bruce Wayne and Batman, I feel like he's really developed a lot of Bruce Wayne, and it feels like Batman, he's putting on an act for me sometimes. Whereas it's supposed to be, this is the real Bruce Wayne when he's Batman. This is the epitome of all his rage and anger, the darkness. Yet it feels like he's still doing a performance as him in those last 2 films a lot of the time. Granted, there are some scenes that are just so perfect for me, like the interrogation scene with him and Joker. He is excellent. I was just trying to kind of decipher, like, why is the voice thing such a meme? Why is it so joked about so much, specifically with only his Batman? Like, why him? I feel like it might come down to that, even though a lot of the time in The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises, I'm not that distracted by it, but I think it does become distracting due to that. And in reality, I might just be pinpointing it to that only because I'm trying to justify a reason why it's number 3. And really, it's just the emotional impact Christian Bale leaves me with is not the strongest out of the ones I have for number 2 and number 1.
At risk of being foolhardy, I guess I would go number 2 with Christian Bale, and I almost put him at number 1 partly because you do have that fully arced character, or at least you have all 3 movies worth to see him grow, to see him, embody and learn with this character, and you see, the journey that he goes through with the other characters, like him and Alfred are some of my favorite, just emotional beats of those movies. And yeah, what it ultimately does come down to, for me anyway, is that there are just other things that are more interesting or that are, slightly edging him out in terms, like, I think he does a really great job at holding those movies together, and he does have a lot of presence, but there is something where he's not necessarily the most interesting person on screen, the most interesting character, and I think it gets really, really close, and I do definitely connect with and identify with him.
Well, you see, I feel like with Batman Begins, he is that, but with The Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises, he's becomes the less interesting person there. But I do think his Bruce Wayne is consistently like one of the best Bruce Waynes ever because of the many relationships that he has in it. So what I love about those movies is, like, I think a lot of the writing and context around his Bruce Wayne is really well developed, because I think there's like 3 different personas that he embodies, which is the fake Bruce Wayne, the real Bruce Wayne when he's like with Michael Caine or Morgan Freeman, and then there's Batman. And I think that a lot of the time, what's great about him as a lead is he uses his performance to elevate the supporting cast.
That's a great point. And even now, I'm sitting there going, is that enough reason to bump him to number 1? Yeah, because it is like, and we've been having kind of a back and forth trying to figure out exactly how to put the finger on why. And yeah, like I think there is something to be said for that ensemble player who really does provide the backbone and who does allow the other performers to shine. But 2, I do agree, like his Bruce Wayne, I think, is probably the most fully formed, fleshed out, and does really sell the idea of his adjustment. You see him in those early stages where he comes back and he almost shoots Joe Chill at one point. Like, you know, I feel like he does embody some of the grief, but also the guy who can clearly function as a public figure billionaire, you know?
Well, I think what they do with his Batman, though, there are motives about it that I don't agree with, like in Dark Knight Rises, how he's just given up on all this. Also seems like he's a bit of a weak Batman. If after only a year and a half, he's like a crippled old man all of a sudden.
Yeah.
There are just qualities that they do to him that I do become critical of as a Batman fan. My number 2 would actually have to be, and after rewatching the Batman 4 times, I can now confidently say that my number 2 is actually Ben Affleck. There's a time where I would say that Affleck is my number 1, and I've seen like BVS and Zack Snyder's Justice League multiple times. I love Ben Affleck's Batman. Part of me still wishes we could get that solo Ben Affleck movie, make the Batfleck movie, you know? What he does best out of all the Batman, for me personally, he is equally magnetic to me as both Bruce Wayne and Batman. I love his like worn down, more blunt, gritty Bruce Wayne, who's just like older and like angrier, and his Batman is just this martial arts ferocity machine who could take out a whole warehouse full of men with assault rifles, you know? And I really do love that. And I think his progression too from BVS into Zack Snyder's Justice League, where a lot of Zack Snyder's Justice League is him sort of making retribution, making amends for who he was in BVS, of wanting to do a hero and do right by Superman for not having believed in him. Like, there's a lot to his character that I think is very strong. I do like the progression of his character, and I think that in terms of an equal fitting for Bruce Wayne and Batman, the like I think you're the best 1-2 combo, it's definitely Ben Affleck for me. I would say that Christian Bale's is my favorite Bruce Wayne, but in terms of like the perfect 1-2 piece, it is Ben Affleck's for me. Yeah, I think he's just very compelling as both of them.
Good call. Thanks for saving the video.
I have a very interesting reason for why I would say who my number 1 is, by the way.
Oh, you mean our number 1?
Our number 1.
Our number 1, Pattinson. The Robert Pattinson Batman. I was sitting here going, is it too soon to declare this? Is it foolhardy to, on the heels of, you know, multiple screenings in, you know, a couple of weeks, in the whole, you know, air of excitement that everyone's had, is it too soon to say that? But the more I've seen it and the more I've thought about it, it's a unique experience for me with a Batman movie because he is perhaps the most engrossing person on screen. Like, every choice he makes is fascinating, and I love the idea, as much as it seems to upset some people that he's not billionaire playboy yet. I really liked his more twisted, more tortured, more emo kid take on the character, because that makes a lot of sense for what age they put him at and what point in his Batman career they're picking up from. Yeah, I think he just brought such a presence, and while a lot of people don't think that there is much difference between him and Batman, and I would agree that there is the probably thinnest line between the two, I still found nuances that are only there when he is just Bruce with Alfred versus when he's Bruce alone but as Batman versus as Batman around other people, whether that be Gordon or criminals or whatever. Yeah, it is a unique experience to have a Batman movie where the first thing everybody wants to talk about is Bruce, is Batman, is that performance. I really think that he just knocked it out of the park in terms of creating a living, emotionally resonant character who fits, you know, everything you associate with being quintessential comic book Batman.
I would agree with all that, obviously. Here's what really dawned on me on my 4th time of watching this movie and why I was like, you know what? I think he is my favorite Batman. Like, Batman. He's not I don't dislike his Bruce Wayne. I completely understand the choice, and I overall enjoy the choice of having his Bruce Wayne be the way it is. And I think it works just right for that particular movie. I still think we need a little bit more of him as Bruce Wayne before I can officially declare, like, I love his Bruce. His Batman, though. It hit me in the moment when he's going through the Penguin's nightclub, the Iceberg Lounge. I used to distinguish kind of the difference between Robert Pattinson as Bruce Wayne and Robert Pattinson as Batman was that like when he's just Robert Pattinson, you just see the boy Bruce Wayne just in an adult body who just reclusive and doesn't know how to be around people, you know, kind of like that weird brother in Wedding Crashers. Like, you know, that's kind of what he is. But when he was going through the nightclub, I realized oh no, that boy is still there. And I think that's what really dawned on me the fourth time I watched this film, is that he carries the boy in the alleyway throughout that entire performance. That is the day Batman was born, was the day his parents died. And in that entire performance, when he is in the Batsuit, he's just a rageful boy.
It's the game face. Yeah. It's the boy with the game face.
It's like when a boy it's like that isolated, psychotic little boy who doesn't know how to really socialize, but is really intelligent, really observant, and has a lot of unresolved anger. It was like kind of dark, not reclusive, non-emotive, but can let it all out through rage, picking on the bullies and the bad guys and stuff, getting his revenge. It feels like just a really intelligent, rageful boy who translates into the dark detective throughout that film. So when watching his performance of like even how he reacts to the cops and reacts to when he feels like Gordon might have betrayed him when he's caught in the interrogation room, he just remains a boy the whole time. And I'm like, damn, that's Batman. There's always a thing there where I feel like the performers that try to make Batman be like the man, like Batman's a man, and which he is. Like physically, he's a man. He's a billionaire man. But I think what Robert Pattinson does is he carries that pain throughout the performance constantly, and he carries that underneath the suit and through the anger, and that's where you feel the anger comes from. And so that's why I personally would say that he is my favorite Batman.
Well, and I think every other Batman has to some degree an element of they want you to relish in the Bruce Wayne and almost aspire to be certain elements of Bruce Wayne, whereas Robert Pattinson's does not have any of that. Like you can identify, you can sympathize, and are sometimes horrified by what he's going through, but he doesn't have that quality where you're like, but he's also pretty cool, you know? Yeah. You're not going to see him cruising down the street in a Lamborghini just yet, you know, making a joke or whatever, and I like that as well. They let that distance be there between you and him.
He's like the boy who just doesn't feel like he belongs or fits in anywhere, who distances himself from people, and so that's why all he knows how to do is instill the feelings that he feels and just evoke fear, and then by the end of the movie he's learning how to connect. Like a hurt boy.
Exactly. Yeah.
It just gets better every time I watch that movie, specifically what he's doing as that character. And I think that's why having that Bruce Wayne be that specific way works, because there's not much of a difference. The only difference is when he's not in the outfit, when he's not in the cowl, he's not scary or intimidating. But when he is in the cowl, he's terrifying, because that's what he is underneath.
Well, and when he is under the cowl, there's some sense of direction and some sense of investment, whereas when he's just Bruce, you get the sense that he doesn't really care to be alive.
And that's why Riddler too, Paul Dano, is also an angry child who just wants family and love. Yeah. So yeah, I think the performance all around of him is great, because for all the reasons I said and more that we've talked about in other videos as well.
And it gives you faith that whatever we see next will be just as rich and will expound upon the character in meaningful ways.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for being here. That was our Batman list. We'll catch you guys soon.